Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order, welcome to Panwo TV. Well, I am here at Albion Place here in Oxford. I'm sure Ellis would find that very significant. And I've come to research quite a grim subject. It's been announced in the local press here that here in Oxford there's a scheme which is it's probably a pilot scheme that will be introduced elsewhere if it's successful, but at the moment it's not being portrayed as that. And it is that homeless people have to have barcodes on them. Now, it's a complicated business. Let me show you the newspaper article that describes it.
Okay, so we'll go into a little bit of background onto this. Now, this is the situation we have it. Now, what it is, it's sad. It's a sad thing, you know, because as I'll be explaining, Oxford has a massive homelessness problem, absolutely massive, biggest outside London. And the university's come up with this idea: all homeless people will be registered on an electronic database and will be issued with an identity card displaying a QR tag. A QR tag is a form of barcode. And so when a passerby wants to give them money, they do it by using their mobile phone. Rather than handing them cash and saying, here's a penny for a cup of tea, use your mobile phone to send them some funds electronically. You may wonder how that will work. It's quite simple, really. The funds is actually transferred into an account. It's not the person's own bank account. It's an account controlled by the person's caseworker down at the local authorities who cares for homeless people. And this person will make sure it's spent on food, rent, passport fees, or utility bills, and not drugs and alcohol, etc. Now, when the donor makes a donation, they'll be able to access the database of the person they've just donated to learn all about him or her. And it's usually him, let's face it. How he became homeless, what was his last job, etc., etc. So you get to snoop into this person's life. It's all explained in this article here, which I'll put a link in the background notes to from the Daily Tory graph. So it's all the details are there. Now it sounds benevolent at first glance. It does, but there's all these problems to do with it. Like, it means now, you may say, well, Ben, you've got a roof over your head, you know, you can't. Oh, right, well, look, if you're gonna say because I've got a roof over my head I can't comment, then it's a waste of time. It means that all right, imagine I don't. Imagine I don't. Then how would you answer my points? It means that they're creating a cashless society, a miniature cashless society. This could turn out to be a trial run. And it might be included into other areas to include people who are not homeless. Now, this would be equivalent of, for example, excuse me, I've got a bit of cough today. For example, universal credit, which essentially is an expansion of the benefit system for the unemployed into the lives of the employed and other people. This could be expanded into other areas too. You could say, well, let's put the unemployed on this along with the homeless people. Then you could say, let's put immigrants on it too. Let's put people who are on probation from prison. Let's put drug addicts on there, people who are receiving medication for drug addiction. Let's put the mentally ill on there, etc., etc., etc. And in the end, you have so many people in those different groups that you'll have most of the people in the world on there, or most of the people in the country. And then the organisers will then, of course, say, well, what the hell? Let's put everyone on the scheme and be done with it. Which, of course, is the ultimate objective of the whole thing. And it gets scary. I mean, there's a local authority in the United States that had the idea of putting microchips into the bodies of homeless people. And they said it was for their own good. And I'm sure they believed that, because it would allow shelter workers to scan the people who came into the shelter, and they'd know about the care they'd received. They'd know about when was the last time they'd slept in a shelter, when was the last time they'd been given a proper meal, when they'd last been given medical treatment, dental checkups, etc., etc. It's all on there. I know there are good intentions behind these schemes, but when it comes to Big Brother, we have to deal with capabilities, not professed intents. We must ask ourselves how this technology could be abused or weaponized. It's like the fingerprinting of children, which I've covered before, and which has affected me personally.
Okay, I've moved a short distance. I'm now in St Ebbs, and that's the Royal Blenheim, and I'm actually going to go and see if I can find one of the homeless people to talk to, which shouldn't be difficult, because There's so many of them. I mean, it's just like, and they're everywhere. They're on every corner. You cannot walk through the city centre without seeing one of them. And very often, especially in the evening time, they'll come up and they'll ask you for money. And that's, I've not walked through the city centre in the last couple of years in the evening time and someone doesn't come up and ask me for money. And it's just distressing, and I'll say more about that later. But apart from London, Oxford has the biggest per capita proportional of homeless people in the country, and it's got worse in the last few years. Definitely, there's always been a few. I mean, always, obviously, there's always going to be some, but it's got worse lately, and it's got a lot to do with the council used to have a little shelter which they shut down. There is a charity called the Gatehouse, and they operate on a voluntary basis. Basically, the people who work there are volunteers, and they have like a dormitory. But they still charge people money to go in. I think it's 80p or £1. I don't know how much it is. They have to charge people to go in there, and not many of the homeless people don't even have that, so they just sleep rough. You walk through here at night; they're in every shop doorway. They're everywhere. It's a grim subject. I'll say more about that in a minute. But I'm just going to head up here now and see if I can find one of them. They may not want to be filmed, which is fair enough. I won't film them if they don't want to be. I just want to ask them more about this particular issue, because there's all kinds of things wrong with this. Because basically, as I've explained, this could easily be expanded into other areas. This is essentially the introduction of a cashless society in miniature. And the thing is, even one in miniature doesn't stay miniature for very long. Very soon, it grows into other areas. It expands. It gets developed. It gets adapted. And before you know it, it's everyone everywhere. And this is all part of this agenda to electronically control everyone. It's like this is why they tried to take my daughter's fingerprints, which I've talked about in a previous video. Let's see if we can see someone. I'll try and find one of them wearing one of the tags, which I just showed you. Maybe I might even see that particular man, the man who's in the article. So I'm here. I'm actually at the Westgate Centre again. Remember I showed you the big Westgate Centre, the new shopping centre in Oxford. This is Bond Square. We're just outside the big new temple to consumerism that I talked about before. There it is, Westgate Centre. So we're just gonna have a look around and see who I can find who's willing to talk to me about this.
So who's behind all this? Well, it's actually this organisation. If you go through it, you eventually come to this organisation, which is called Greater Change. Give Smarter. Now, it says here, a mobile donation system designed to help those who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. The boom in contactless technology means that fewer people now carry change. Oh, we need to catch the society then. Okay. Anyway, I don't want to be nasty, because these are good people, I think. This creates its own problems for those who rely on the generosity of others to survive. Through contactless payments, we're able to provide rent deposits, skills courses, and identification documents for those in need. Help somebody experiencing homelessness to leave it behind for good today. Well, of course, who wouldn't want that? It sounds very benevolent. I'm sure it's intended that way. So let's have a look at the people who are actually involved in this. Now we have the Alex McCallion. He's the person who was interviewed for that newspaper on the top left there. And there's Jonathan Tan, Chief Operating Officer, Beth Chaplow, Marketing Assistant, Alexandra Damerow, Operations Intern. They're smiling, they look cheerful, they're young people, they're obviously 20-something, and I'm sure they want to do what is good. That's why they're involved in this. I don't doubt their intentions for 1 second. Now here's the About page, and you can see it here. If you go to this website, there'll be a link if I put a link in there in the description box, well, at least there'll be links from the links I provide. There's a little video and it explains how it's very moving, and it's filmed on Brasenose Lane, and to where you saw me, and it explains how, and you see a woman walking past a homeless man, and he's really looking sad, and so she uses her mobile phone, using the app provided by Greater Change, to give him some money. And it talks about the technology, how it works, and the innovation. It talks about the problem with giving cash on the streets. It says here fewer people carry cash. I do anyway. Professional begging, funding addictions, no scope for aid or matched funding, does not fund long-term solutions. And then it gives the reasons how they're solving that. Money is spent on plans that will make a long-term change to a person's life. Support workers only refer people who are ready to achieve long-term change. Non-financial support is provided by the caseworker. Donations can be increased through matched funding or gift aid. It is clear exactly how donations will be spent. So yeah, it's a big long discussion here, and it sounds good. It sounds generous, and it sounds like it's a creative way of solving a massive social problem, which is a problem all over the world, but it seems to be especially bad on British standards. It's especially bad in Oxford. So it's difficult to, and I feel bad in a way, arguing against this. So there's a frequently asked questions page here, which is all about, it gives you some few details here, just explains how the system works. What if a person's circumstances change? How many people sign up? Are payments secure? Can I split my donation? Can I gift aid my donation? Employer wants to make charitable, things like that. And it just talks about this is the worrying part here. How many homeless people are there in the UK? This is a more general question here, and it talks about how they're broken down. And it's quite alarming, actually. As you can see here, 9,000 or over 9,000 people are sleeping rough regularly. And I know compared to India and places like that, it's a small number. But really, is it really not possible to give 9,000 people a bed? Is it really not possible? I'll say more about that in a minute, but it's frustrating. 8,000 people sleep in cars, tents and public transports. Well, that's the same as sleeping rough, effectively. So you could almost double the number originally. 11,000 squatters in unlicensed non-residential buildings. Well, that's now the thing about squatting is actually not. It's amazing actually how nice some squats can be. I mean, my uncle lived in a squat, and it was very pleasant. You wouldn't know it was an illegal occupation because he had electricity and water and things like that. It was a negotiated squat. In other words, he had, because it was, there was no landlord wanted him out. No one actually said they wanted him out. So he negotiated it with the local authorities, and they allowed him to put in utilities and things like that. So it depends what condition the squat is, basically. But that's 11,000 people. 11,000 people living in like that. 39,000 living in hostels and refuges. Yeah, those can be pretty bloody awful. You see, being at the hospital, you get these people in all the time for various reasons, and some of them just want to be somewhere when it's cold, out the cold. A good way of getting out of a cold and wet evening in a winter's night in Britain is to admit yourself to NHS A&E. And so I understand what people would come in with complaining of various things, and they'd be processed. Even people would self-harm in order to do this. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. 17,000 in unsuitable temporary accommodation, and this is, that's pretty bad. And then 60,000 sofa surfers, which is kind of similar to the unsuitable temporary accommodation. Sofa surfers are people who just stay with friends, and sofa means they sleep on the sofa, because very often the person has no spare room for them. So that's a huge amount of people who don't have proper homes. Huge amount of people, and it's baffling, and it's upsetting that this goes on in this day and age. I'll say more about. I'll say more about that. Well, I'll say more about that in a minute. All right, because So I wasn't sure which order I was going to put this video in, but yeah, I'll say more about that in a minute.
Okay, I found somebody. He was a chap who didn't want to be filmed and didn't want me to say anything about him. Fair enough. He doesn't have the badge around his neck with the barcode, but he's heard about it, and his caseworkers told him about it, and he's considering being a part of it. I asked him a few questions. I asked him what, basically, well, he wasn't necessarily the guy to know. I'm going to try and make a few phone calls later, see if I can get in touch with someone who does. But he did say, he said that he hadn't heard. I asked him, have you heard anything else about where this scheme is going? Like, is it likely to involve the implanting of microchips into the body? Has anyone suggested that kind of scheme? Well, he mentioned it as a possibility that kind of scheme could emerge, where instead of having this barcode on a plastic card around your neck, on a lanyard, you actually have a microchip in your body. He said he doesn't know anything about that. He's not heard anything about that. He also has not heard about another question I wanted to ask about whether it's been expanded into other areas, whether it's going to be trying it out in other cities, for example, once this supposed pilot scheme in Oxford has gone ahead. And he said he didn't know anything about that. And then I asked him, I'm just going to cross over the road here. It's Broad Street over there. I know. Remember, that's where all the bookshops are, I told you earlier. Where I bought Milo. I tried to buy Milo's book and bought Jordan Peterson's book. He hadn't heard about anything like that. And he hadn't heard about any organisations or any individuals who might be involved in this. Nothing sinister. It's just something that his caseworker suggested to him, and he'd heard about it in the media, that sort of thing. Well, it was interesting. I mean, that's all he could tell me. So, fair enough. I just left him in peace. And of course, he asked me for some money, and I didn't give him any. I told him I didn't have any. And it's awful when that happens. It really is. It's a really, really upsetting situation, because I could have given him some. I do have money in my pocket I could give him. I could have given him some. I could have given him £1. I've got a couple of quid in my pocket. I could have given him £1, and then he'd have spent the night at the gatehouse, or maybe bought himself a sandwich or something. But then, I could have got to another homeless person, and they'd asked me for some money, and I could give them another £1, and that'd be 2 people I helped out. But then what happens after that? There are at least, I think it said, I read somewhere there's at least a dozen people every night in Oxford sleeping rough. At least a dozen. And it's gone up, as I said. It's the biggest homeless population per size of the city and per size of population outside London. I'd have to come down. You see, once I'd given £1 to all those people, I wouldn't have enough for my dinner. And if I came back and I did it again the following day, and the following day after that, I wouldn't have enough to pay my rent. And nothing would change. Once I'd run out of money, where would they go from there? Did you see how frustrating it is? It's utterly frustrating when you consider how little it costs, actually, to provide a proper service for these people, to provide just basic accommodation. And indeed, Oxford used to do that, just provide basic accommodation for homeless people. And I mean, it's something, as I said, I think I mentioned this, the university could, the amount of money spent on these tags and this barcode, Big Brother, database state scheme, they could probably afford to put them up for the night for quite a while. It's like that ridiculous thing. Like, you see, like a few A few months ago, the council went around fining homeless people like they're ever going to get any money off them. Like they're ever going to pay any fine. We're giving out £500 fines for these people, which is just fantasy land. Utter fantasy land. Because they were blocking up fire escapes and things like that. With their sleeping bags and their tents and their big boxes of cardboard boxes they sleep in. And the council employed about 4 or 5 of these little homeless Himmlers to strut around town writing out tickets and handing them to these homeless people. All these let's say they were on 15,000 a year. 5 of them. That's, well, you can do the maths yourself. And all that money they spent going around issuing fines, they know they're never going to collect. They could have spent that money on reopening the hostel and giving those people somewhere to stay. And it is one of these strange contradictions of the modern world that we have all this technology, we have all this grandeur. Look at this, look how much this traditional Oxford edifice here costs. You just imagine it, can't you? And at the same time, we have people who don't even have a roof over their head, don't have a regular supply of food. People who die of cold in the winter. Like last winter, 4 or 5 of them just froze to death. They found their bodies like icicles. There's like lumps of beef carcasses that come out of a warehouse freezer, just lying in shop doorways, and it's like... And this is in Britain. Unbelievable. I wish it was unbelievable, but it's not. Oh, sorry, I had to switch cameras there. I mean, one of the good things about having 2 cameras is that if the battery goes on one, you have another. Yeah, I mean, I think this contradiction I'm talking about is very well illustrated by the story of Lee Boo. Now, bear with me if I've told you this story already, because I have. I think I've probably mentioned this story on this channel before. But Lee Boo is an interesting case. Lee Boo was a prince. He was a young man who was the son of the chieftain of a very isolated island community in the South Pacific. And his island literally had no contact with the outside world. There was just a few hundred people living on a few small scraps of land with the infinite cosmic ocean around them, which what they believed was the infinite cosmic ocean. They thought there was just their island and the sea that went on forever. And so they had a very obviously a very isolated, very somewhat restricted view of the world. So when Captain Cook turned up with his ship, or I don't know if it was Captain Cook, I can't remember, it was one of these big explorers, it was a bit of a surprise. And the chieftain asked Captain Cook, whoever it was, to take on board his ship his son. He said, because the people then learnt about the outside world. They realised that they weren't just a little island in the middle of nowhere, and that they actually were just one island in a huge sea which covered the whole earth, and there are other lands, and there was huge continents and things like that. And so the chieftain said, please take my son with you on board your ship and show him the land you come from. I don't want to get the sun in your eyes. I don't want it. Here we are. Take him on board your ship and take him back to your country where you come from. And then just temporarily, and you can bring him back, of course. I don't think he realised that, in those days, that kind of journey would take years. But the Captain Cook said, all right. So Lee Boo went on board the ship with them and they left the island. Eventually, they got back to Britain, and Lee Boo was shown London. He was shown the city of London in the 19th century, which is quite an extraordinary sight if you've lived your whole life on a little island in the South Pacific, and suddenly you see a huge city of a million or more people, or whatever it was in those days, with railways and factories and steamships and the underground and things like that. It's an incredible thing to behold. All those people, so many people. And so Lee Boo he was given a place to live. I mean, I think he was only about 16 at the time, just a little boy, really. And he was given I think a wealthy family took him in, gave him a place, a roof over his head to stay. And of course they looked after him, they gave him some clothes to wear, some nice posh clothes, because he stayed with some well-to-do people. They gave him some nice clothes and they gave him some money, let him have a wander around, explore the city, etc. And one day Li Bu came home. He came back to the house completely naked with no money. And the family were horrified. They thought he must have been... They said he must have been mugged. Someone must have dragged him off and stole his clothes and stole everything he had. Stole all his money. And they were about to call the police. And he said, no. He said, it's those people who were sleeping down under the bridge by the river. What about it? He says, well, I gave it all to them. I gave them my clothes and money, of course, because they had none. And they tried to explain to him what was going on. I said, look, those are homeless people. They say they are just tramps. You know, it's all a part of life in this country, I'm afraid. You know. And Li Bu said, I don't understand your people and your land. He said, you have magic that the wisest wizard on my island could never produce. You have created wonders beyond anything that we could ever dream of. Yet on my island, everybody has a home. Everybody has a house to live in. Everybody has enough food. I don't understand how people so much greater than my own cannot manage that very, very simple thing. And it's just that very poignant. That's a very poignant sort of naivety that he had, which is incredibly illustrative. And sometimes it takes an outsider to see that. And that's kind of like maybe we should start thinking a bit more like Li Bu and look at our own culture and our own society as an outsider would see it. And think to ourselves, you know, why is it we can't house everyone? Why is it some people don't have enough food? We're capable of creating. Surely are we not capable of that? When we can do so much more. Sending rockets into space, ships across the ocean. Can't we give everyone a roof over their head and food on the table? Surely that's not too much to ask. And it's funny because like I never think of myself as rich. I mean, I'm not. As I said, you know, if I had to, I could possibly feed and house all the homeless people in Oxford for about a week, but then I'd be homeless myself. Everyone would be back to square one. The only difference is I'd be on square one with them. It's not a solution. I wish it was. Wish I could do that. It's really sad. But one thing's for certain. Putting barcodes on them and putting them on a database state and forbidding them access to cash. Not only is that not a solution for them, but it's an enormous danger to everyone else.
So this has been a grim and really quite depressing subject to cover, because it's about a major social problem that, as I've said, is worldwide, but seems to be most prevalent in Oxford when it comes to Britain. And something has to be done about it. And there are a group of people who've got together and want to do something about it. And I admire that. I really do. These are young people who could be out enjoying themselves and not giving a damn like so many of them do. And they've decided to take matters into their own hands to solve this major social problem which is causing so much suffering. At the same time, I see what could go wrong here. How this could be abused, how this could be weaponized, this whole system. And I know that there are those who want to do it, and to create a world which would be a prison camp for all of us, for everybody. And I can't let that go. I I can't let this pass without saying something about that, which is what I've done. So I just hope we can have the good side of all this without the bad, because technology is not evil, science is not evil. All this Big Brother technology is not inherently evil. It's morally neutral. It's how you use it that counts, and how you use it depends on who we are as a species, what our objective is in the society that we want to build, and the awareness that there are those in powerful positions within our society who want nothing but our destruction, and they want to create a society which will be fundamentally destructive for planet Earth, its human inhabitants, and all other life that exists on it. Thank you for watching Herpanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.